So what's up guys, what I would come on to do a little video for you this afternoon. Just I want to give you guys a little bit of advice. So if you've ever had an incident on a bus route or on a train route here in London, best thing to do is report that incident to TfL. Now, recently I've had to report two bus drivers in the space of about 2 weeks for different incidents. I actually had to report a bus driver last year as well. So the recent incident where so the first one, the most recent one was Wednesday. We went down to Watney Market on Wednesday because I had an appointment with my job coach to kind of look at maybe setting up some volunteer work for me, maybe on a farm or something like that. Um, so obviously we went down for that appointment. We came out, went in a few of the shops down Watney Market, and then went to the bus stop, waited for the bus. 115 came along. We got on the bus. Now the bus that on Wednesday was quite busy, and it was around about 2:25 to 3. And we got on the bus, and we were going along, on the driver. It was a female. She was requesting that people make use of the seats that were available upstairs. She was saying that there were seats available upstairs for people to go and sit down upstairs. Which is what they were being what that request was. We got a little bit further down. I think we got to Limehouse, and she said that she wasn't moving the bus unless people went and sat down on the seats that were available upstairs. And that's kind of when a bit of an argument kind of erupted because multiple passengers were saying that there were no seats available upstairs. And the driver wasn't really listening to what people were saying. People were trying to say to her, there's no seats available upstairs. Because I think a couple of people had gone upstairs and stood upstairs. And the driver had to go at them for standing upstairs and said to them, you can't stand up, you can't stand on the upper deck, you need to sit down. So they'd obviously come back downstairs because there were no seats. I think the reason they stood up was because there were no seats for anyone to sit down, and that's what people were trying to tell the driver. That they were trying to explain to the driver that there were no seats available upstairs for people to sit down. Multiple people had gone upstairs and had come back down because there were no seats up there. I was like, how actually ask people to go and sit upstairs when there are no seats upstairs for people to sit down? You can't be requesting people to go and sit upstairs when there's no seats available up there, which is what the problem was. Um, you know, there's one thing that bus drivers keep doing, is they keep letting way too many people on the bus. And then they start saying, "Oh, please move down inside the bus. Please move down inside the bus, or use all available seats, or whatever." And it's like they shouldn't keep letting too many people on the bus. A lot of bus drivers keep doing this. Now, I'm not saying that every bus driver does this. But there are a lot of bus drivers that are pretty good and don't do things like this. But it's unfortunately there are quite a lot of bus drivers that do that, and are guilty of doing that, And I feel at the end of the day, I think it is becoming a bit of an issue at this point. I think it's becoming a major problem, and it's becoming a bit of a safety problem now as well. Like the fact that drivers are letting too many people on the bus when the buses are so busy, it causes a lot of problems. It causes a lot, it handles arguments, as, Wednesday's example proves. People were asked to go and sit down in the seats that were available upstairs. There were no seats up there. and there ended up being an argument because the driver, people were trying to tell the driver that there were no seats available upstairs. She wasn't listening. She was adamant that there were seats available upstairs, just, even despite the fact that I think two or three people had gone upstairs to try and sit down upstairs and ended up having to come back down because there were no seats up there. It's just madness, I think at the end of the day, I felt like I had that right to report the driver because she had caused an unnecessary argument with passengers, basically refusing to move the bus unless people had gone and sat down upstairs, but they couldn't go and sit down upstairs because there were no seats. Had there been seats available, people would have gone and sat upstairs. You also can't really force people to go and sit down upstairs if they don't want to. If they don't want to they don't want to go upstairs. They don't have to do that. Sometimes it feels like bus drivers are are trying to force people to do that. Um, and I just feel like bus drivers shouldn't be forcing people to do that if they don't want to do that. Sometimes people are, standing up because they might only be going a short distance and it's not really worth them going and sitting down when they're only going a few stops or whatever, which is, which is the problem. And it's just ridiculous. Some of these bus drivers are so fucking stupid. And at the end of the day, when they're putting not only are they not just my safety, but the safety of other passengers at risk, I think that I feel like they deserve to be reported. I mean, obviously we had another incident the other week. We were going up to Stratford. Now we got to Landon Park, and now obviously we didn't what we should have done the day before is we should have looked up to make sure that the DLR trains were running on the Friday. This was Good Friday. When we got down to Landon Park Station, there was no DLR trains, but we didn't know that because we hadn't thought to kind of look it up to make sure the trains were running. Um, so we crossed over the road and we were waiting for the 108 bus. Now the 108 bus came along, we got on. There was already two people on the bus with prams. My mum has a pram that she uses for shopping, so she said to the driver that she would fold her pram down, which she did. And we were stood by the back doors. Now we didn't sit down because there weren't really, when we first got on the bus, there weren't really any seats, so we kind of had to stand up. The bus was obviously really busy that day due to there being no DLR trains. So of course all of the buses, that kind of went to Stratford were all going to be really busy. The 108 to D8s, the 425s, the 25s, they were all going to be really busy because of there being no trains. On that, also obviously there being no trains, obviously on obviously over that weekend. Um, so we got the bus back we got the bus back to we got down as far as I think it was just down probably just down from Bow Flyover, and another couple got on the bus with a third pushchair. Now, bearing in mind there was already two people on the buses with pushchairs, and there was no space for the woman to go with her pram. The driver shouldn't have let her on the bus, but he did, and he allowed them to stand right by the front doors. So for the last kind of three stops before we got to Stratford, the driver kind of had to drive, straight past the bus stop, and he couldn't stop. He couldn't let anyone on because he'd let this couple on with their pram, and they were stood right by the front door. And he had kind of broken a rule there because rules state that bus drivers are not allowed to let more than two people on the bus with pushchairs. Unless you can actually fold your pram down, then it's not a problem. But at the end of the day, when there was there were already being two people on the bus with pushchairs, he should not have allowed the third couple on with their pushchair. He should have made them wait for the next bus because that would have been a sensible thing to do. And instead of letting them on and letting them stand right by the front door, which to me isn't really a safe thing to do. So we got to Westfield. the driver opened the doors. People had started getting off the bus. I'd already gotten off the bus. I was waiting for my mum to get off the bus behind me with her, she had the pram and everything. And as she was getting off the bus, the driver started closing the back doors. So I was like, what the fuck is he doing? So I went down to the front and I went, oi, I had a ride going. I went, you fucking idiot. I said, what the fuck are you doing? I said, you've just nearly shut my mum in the back doors of the bus. What the fuck? I said, you fucking stupid. I said, what the fuck are you doing? I said, what? I was like, fucking hell, mate, you're a fucking idiot. To be honest, I really the reason I lost my temper like that was because, what he'd done was dangerous and unsafe. What he'd done was incredibly dangerous. Because my mum, at the end of the day, my mum had been injured. Thankfully it was her pram that got hauled in the doors and not her. Had she been hauled in the doors, she probably would have been quite badly hurt. Had her arms been hauled in the doors, she would have been, her arms would have been broke. You know, it's like but I don't even know why he did that. Like, I don't even know why he started closing the doors. I don't know if he thought that everyone had gotten off or what, but it was just really like mad the fact that he'd opened the doors to let people off, and we'd already gotten like a few people had already gotten off in front of me. I'd gotten off. My mum was getting off of the pram, and he started closing the doors, and it's like, well, what the fuck was he doing? Why the fuck was he closing the doors as someone was getting off the bus? That's a really dangerous thing to do. And the fact that that was the main reason I reported him. Not only has he broken a rule in letting more than two people on the bus with pushchairs, but also the fact that his actions had nearly resulted in my mum getting hurt. She nearly she was nearly halting the doors. Thankfully, it was her pram and not her that got halting the doors. It was like when I was having a go at him, he just sat there looking like he didn't give a fuck. The driver didn't seem to care about the fact that he'd just nearly injured someone. The fact that he'd just nearly hooked someone in the doors. I was having a go at him and he was just sat there looking at me as if to say, well, what do you want me to do? He wasn't bothered by the fact that he'd just very nearly, injured someone. And he didn't seem to care about the fact that he'd just done something that was incredible, that was actually, really quite dangerous and unsafe. Closing the doors as someone was getting off the bus, which he should never have done. That was not a sensible thing to do, and it was a stupid thing to do. And it was the fact that my mum had been hurt. That's why I lost my temper the way I did. It was knowing that my mum had nearly been hurt because he'd started closing the fucking back doors as she was getting off the bus. In what way is that a sensible thing for a fucking bus driver to do? Start closing the doors as someone's getting off the bus? That's such a fucking stupid and dumb thing to do. I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he started closing the doors. I don't know if, as I said, I don't know if he thought that maybe everyone had gotten off the bus or not. I don't know. But what he did was so fucking stupid. It's unbelievable. It's like I remember last year we were going to an appointment down Mile End, down at Mile End Hospital. We got on the bus. The bus again was another situation where the bus was really busy, and the driver let people on with their suitcases and shopping trolleys, and they ended up blocking the downway. So other people were getting on the bus and they couldn't get down the downway. There were seats available at the back, but nobody could get to those seats because they couldn't get past the people who had their suitcases and shopping trolleys in the downway. I had to stand right by the back doors. Now, normally when I get on the bus, I do try not to stand by the back doors, because obviously it makes it a little bit more difficult for people sort of getting on and off the bus. So I try to avoid doing that. But that day, I had no other choice but to stand right by the back doors because there wasn't really anywhere else for me to stand. So we got to Hopperfield Road, and the driver opened the back doors. And as he opened the back doors, I nearly went flying out of the bus. Thankfully, my mum grabbed me and stopped me from falling. Otherwise, I'd have gone backwards and landed right on my back. Um, and it was just, what he did was really that. I mean, obviously, as I started having a go at him, my mum was, I had started having a go at him, and then this other woman, jumped in and she was like, you guys should come and sit down, blah, 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 blah. We chosen to stand up because we weren't going that far. Had we been going further away, we would have sat down. Um, but obviously, the driver was asking people to move down, but I was requesting that people move down the bus because I think this is like it's illegal for for passengers to be stood by the cab or something like that. So he was asking people to move down, but people couldn't move down because these people were blocking the downway with their shopping trolleys and their prams, like their shopping trolleys and their suitcases and that. And I mean, it's just so dead, like then unsafe, dangerous, putting the safety of passengers at risk. It's just crazy with some of the things that some of these bus drivers do. Sometimes it feels like some bus drivers don't care about passenger safety. Like it feels like safety, like the safety of of their passengers, just isn't a priority to them. I mean, I do fear that one day there is going to be a really, really serious accident, multiple casualties, and these bus drivers will have to be taught how to learn a valuable lesson. And I mean, it's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I've always said that what bus drivers should do, especially when the buses are really busy, that what they should do is they should let out their cabs and they should look, you know, they should look to see if there is any space for people to get on the bus with their shopping trolleys or prams or suitcases before they let people on. And if there's no space, don't let them on. You know, I mean, as I said, that bus driver the other week when we were going to Stratford, there was no space for any more pushchairs. Yet he still let that hopper on with their pushchair, and they were stood right by the front doors. That he should not have done that. There was already two people on the bus. My mum had to fold her pram down, but he let them go on the bus and stand right by the front doors. It was like, why did he do that? That was again not exactly a safe thing to do. You know, it's actually I've read it up online, and it's actually illegal for people to for there to be anything obstructing the doors or obstructing the gangways that might stop people from being able to get off the bus in an emergency or things like that. And so you see that you see this a lot with these buses. Unfortunately, people end up with their prams and all that kind of thing blocking the back doors or whatever, and people can't get off. And this happens a lot, unfortunately. Drivers are letting more people, are letting more than two people on at a time with push chairs when they're not, like the prams and stuff, when they're not supposed to do that. It's two prams or one pram in a wheelchair. That is what the rule is. But for some reason, a lot of drivers ignore that rule and let more than three people on with push chairs when they shouldn't, when they're not supposed to do that. You know, and when bus drivers are breaking the rules like that, they have to be reported. I'm not saying they deserve to lose their job over it, but I'm saying that they certainly deserve to be told, be given a warning at least, or deserve to be told off for the fact that they're not following the rules. For the fact that they're letting more than two people on at a time with pushchairs when they're not supposed to do that. And the fact that so many bus drivers are doing this, and this is becoming such a huge problem now. You know, which at the end of the day, it is becoming a huge problem now. And this is a situation where so many bus drivers are doing this. I mean, I've said my piece. I thought I did get one back and a reply back from TFL about my complaint from the other week. I'm still waiting on a response from them for my complaint that I made on Wednesday. Obviously, had that bus driver not been such an arsehole, I wouldn't have reported her. Simple. That goes without saying. So I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I'll see you for another one soon. Bye bye.